I've always believed that children see the world differently than adults, not just because of their height or perspective, but because they haven't yet learned to ignore their instincts. They haven't been taught to rationalize away the inconsistencies that prickle at the edges of awareness. My grandson Jamie reminded me of this truth on the day of my daughter's second wedding, and possibly saved her life because of it. The May afternoon had been picture perfect for Kathleen's outdoor ceremony at the Rosewood Hotel's Garden Pavilion. After 3 years of grief following Richard's unexpected heart attack, my daughter deserved this happiness. Andrew Parker, her new husband, had appeared in her life like something from a romance novel. Handsome, attentive, successful, and seemingly devoted to both Kathleen and Jamie. I'd had my reservations, of course, the whirlwind nature of their relationship. The way Andrew sometimes watched Kathleen when he thought no one was looking, not with love, but with calculation. The convenient vagueness about his past. But I'd kept my concerns to myself. At 65, I'd learned that unsolicited maternal advice rarely yielded positive results, especially regarding matters of the heart. The reception was in full swing, the ballroom elegant with white roses and crystal, when Jamie abandoned the children's table where he had been contentedly drawing. He rushed to my side, his small face drained of color, his hand cold as it gripped mine. "Grandma Lucy, I want to go home now," he whispered urgently. I set down my champagne flute, immediately concerned. Jamie was a calm child, not prone to outbursts or demands. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" His eyes darted fearfully toward the head table where Kathleen and Andrew sat with their wedding party. "You didn't see what's under the table?" I frowned, following his gaze. The head table was draped with floor-length white linen, adorned with floral arrangements and glittering tableware. Nothing seemed amiss. "Under the table?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light despite his obvious distress. Jamie nodded vigorously, his voice dropping even lower. "There's a man's wallet. It fell out, but it doesn't have Andrew's picture in it. It has a different name and a different lady's picture." A chill ran through me despite the warm ballroom. "Are you sure, Jamie?" "I was playing hide-and-seek with Tyler," he explained, referring to the ring bearer, "and I went under the table and saw it. The ID says Michael Townsend, not Andrew Parker. And there's a picture of him with another lady, not Mom." I've spent 30 years as a forensic psychologist working with law enforcement, specializing in confidence schemes and fraud before my retirement. Something in Jamie's description triggered my professional instincts. Children. Jamie's age rarely fabricates specific details like names. They might imagine monsters or fears, but not identity documents with consistent alternate personas. "Show me," I said, rising from my seat. "Discreetly, Jamie." He led me toward the head table, where Andrew was engaged in animated conversation with his best man, a slick-looking individual named Drake, who had been introduced as an old college friend. Kathleen was momentarily absent, likely visiting with guests at other tables. "Pretend you're fixing my shoelace," Jamie instructed, with a child's straightforward practicality. I knelt beside him near the head table, ostensibly adjusting his small dress shoe. From this vantage point, I could see beneath the white tablecloth. There, partially hidden by the table leg closest to Andrew's seat, was a leather wallet, open just enough to reveal the edge of what appeared to be an ID card. Without touching it, I could make out the beginning of a name, Mitch, and the top of a photograph that was definitely not Andrew. My heart began to pound. In my years of practice, I'd seen countless cases of identity fraud and romantic scams. The possibility that my daughter had just married a man who wasn't who he claimed to be sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Grandma Lucy, what do we do?" Jamie whispered, his small face serious beyond his years. A legitimate question with no simple answer. If Andrew, or Michael, or whoever he was, had gone to the trouble of creating a false identity, confronting him directly would only give him an opportunity to destroy evidence and craft explanations. Kathleen, deeply in love and celebrating what she believed was the beginning of her happily ever after, would likely dismiss any accusations without irrefutable proof. "We're going to be very careful," I told Jamie, standing up and smoothing my dress. "And very smart. This is important, Jamie. You can't tell anyone else what you saw, not even your mom. Not yet." "Is Mom in danger?" he asked, his lower lip trembling slightly. I chose my words carefully, aware of how perceptive children can be to adult attempts at deception. "I don't think there's any immediate danger, But we need to find out more about Andrew. You did exactly right by telling me." As if summoned by our whispers, Andrew himself approached, champagne flute in hand and his $1,000,000 smile in place. "There's my best guy," he exclaimed, ruffling Jamie's hair. "Are you having fun, buddy?" I watched my grandson's face, seeing the subtle shift as he forced a smile for his new stepfather. At 6 years old, he was already learning the adult skill of masking true feelings behind social courtesy. "Yes," Jamie replied, his voice small but steady. "Grandma Lucy was just fixing my shoe." Andrew turned that charismatic smile toward me. "Lucy, you look beautiful today. I was just telling Drake how lucky I am to be joining such an amazing family." I returned his smile with practiced ease, decades of professional experience allowing me to hide my suspicions. "The ceremony was lovely. You and Kathleen make a stunning couple." "I'm the fortunate one," he said, wrapping an arm around Jamie's shoulders. "A gorgeous wife and this great little man as a bonus." Something in the proprietary way his hand gripped Jamie's shoulder sent another chill through me. If my suspicions were correct, Andrew's interest in my grandson might have nothing to do with paternal affection and everything to do with the trust fund Richard had established for his only child. A fund that would pass to Kathleen's guardianship now that she had remarried. "I should find Kathleen," Andrew continued. "First dance is coming up soon." As he walked away, Jamie pressed closer to my side. "I don't want to stay at the wedding, Grandma Lucy." I made a split-second decision. "Go find your mom and tell her you're feeling tired. Ask if you can come home with me early. Can you do that?" He nodded solemnly and headed toward Kathleen, who was chatting with cousins across the room. Glancing around to ensure no one was watching, I quickly knelt beside the head table again. The wallet was still there. Without touching it, I used my phone to snap several photos from different angles, capturing as much of the visible ID and contents as possible. As I stood, I locked eyes with Drake, Andrew's best man, watching me from across the room with an expression that sent ice through my veins. He raised his champagne in a mock toast, his eyes never leaving mine. He had seen me, and something told me he knew exactly what I had discovered. By the time Jamie returned with a concerned Kathleen, I had composed myself. "Mom, is it okay if Jamie comes home with you?" Kathleen asked. "He says he's got a headache." "Of course," I assured her, squeezing her hand. "You enjoy your special day. We'll be fine." Kathleen kissed Jamie's forehead. "Feel better, sweetheart. I'll see you tomorrow before we leave for the honeymoon." As we walked toward the exit, I felt Drake's eyes following us. At the door, I couldn't resist looking back. He was now seated beside Andrew, leaning close, speaking intently. Andrew's head snapped up, his gaze finding mine across the crowded ballroom. The mask of charm slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. He recovered quickly, raising his glass in my direction with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Grandma Lucy," Jamie tugged at my hand. "I think the bad man saw you." Out of the mouths of babes. As we stepped into the evening air, I knew we had very little time. Whatever game Andrew or Michael was playing, he now knew I had glimpsed behind the curtain. The question was, how far would he go to protect his secrets? The drive to my home in Brookside Heights was silent, Jamie dozing in the back seat while my mind raced through possibilities and implications. If Andrew Parker wasn't actually Andrew Parker, who was he? And more importantly, what did he want from my daughter? Richard's death had left Kathleen financially secure, not excessively wealthy, but comfortable with life insurance, their modernist home in the suburbs, and investment accounts. The most substantial asset was Jamie's trust fund, which Richard had established with the proceeds from selling his software company before his heart attack. $2 million, inaccessible to anyone but Jamie until his 25th birthday, unless certain provisions were activated. One of those provisions, I recalled with growing unease, allowed for early distributions if approved by Jamie's legal guardians for education or health needs. With Richard gone, Kathleen was the sole trustee, and now, as her husband, Andrew would have significant influence, if not direct control. I carried my sleeping grandson into my guest bedroom, which remained decorated with dinosaur wallpaper from his frequent weekend visits. After tucking him in, I retreated to my study, a room Richard had jokingly called Command Central for its wall of filing cabinets and multiple monitors, remnants of my days consulting on fraud cases. My fingers hovered over my laptop keyboard. Was I overreacting? Perhaps there was an innocent explanation for what Jamie had seen. Andrew could have borrowed someone's wallet, or maybe Jamie had misunderstood what he'd glimpsed in the dim space beneath the table. But my instincts, the same ones that had helped me identify patterns in dozens of fraud cases, were screaming otherwise. I uploaded the photos from my phone and enhanced them using software I'd kept current even after retirement. The images weren't perfect, but I could clearly make out the name Michael Townsend on what appeared to be a driver's license. The photograph was partially obscured by the wallet's fold, but what was visible matched Andrew's distinctive jawline and eyes. Another photo showed the edge of a credit card and what looked like a woman's photograph, someone who definitely wasn't Kathleen. "Who are you really, Andrew Parker?" I murmured, opening a browser window. 3 hours later, my dining room table was covered with notes and my eyes burned from staring at screens. The preliminary picture emerging was troubling, to say the least. Andrew Parker had a robust digital footprint, LinkedIn profile listing him as an investment consultant with Parker Financial Services, social media dating back 5 years, alumni listings from Wharton Business School. But everything older than 5 years was conspicuously absent. No college yearbook photos, no mentions in business journals prior to 2017. His company website featured impressive testimonials, but no client names. Michael Townsend, by contrast, was a ghost. My law enforcement database access had expired with my retirement, but public records searches showed 3 Michael Townsends in our state, one deceased, one incarcerated, and one 84-year-old retired teacher. I was hitting digital dead ends when my cell phone rang, Kathleen's number. It was after midnight. "Mom?" Her voice was tight. "Is Jamie okay?" "He's sound asleep," I assured her. "Is everything all right? It's late for a bride to be calling her mother." A shaky laugh. "Everything's fine. It's just, Andrew was concerned about Jamie leaving early. He said you seemed upset about something." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Andrew was already working to undermine my credibility. Classic manipulation technique. "Not upset at all," I replied carefully. "Jamie had a headache, that's all. I'm sure he'll be fine after a good night's sleep." "Did he say anything to you? About Andrew, I mean?" The question caught me off guard. "Nothing specific. Why do you ask?" A pause, then. "Andrew thinks Jamie might be having trouble adjusting to the idea of having a stepfather. He suggested maybe Jamie should talk to someone professional." Alarm bells clanged in my mind. Andrew was moving quickly to isolate Jamie, the only witness to his true identity. "That seems premature," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Jamie's been through a lot with losing Richard. New transitions take time. I know, but Andrew has a friend who specializes in child psychology. He thinks it might help Jamie open up about any concerns. A friend, like Drake, the best man who'd watched me with such calculated interest. I needed to tread carefully here. "Let's discuss it when you get back from your honeymoon," I suggested. "Jamie seems perfectly fine to me, just tired from all the excitement." "Okay," Kathleen agreed, sounding relieved. "Sorry to call so late." Andrew was just worried. After hanging up, I sat motionless, processing this new development. Andrew was already attempting to control the narrative, positioning Jamie as troubled and me as potentially overreactive. The speed of his response suggested this wasn't improvisation. It felt like a contingency plan being activated. I returned to my research with renewed urgency. If Andrew had used this identity before, there might be patterns, previous victims. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I found the first red flag. A small obituary from Pittsburgh, dated 4 years ago. Eleanor Townsend, 72, passed peacefully at home after a brief illness. She is survived by her husband of 11 months, Michael Townsend. Attached was a grainy photograph of the grieving widower at the funeral, unmistakably Andrew, though with different hair and glasses. Further searching revealed that Eleanor had been a wealthy widow when she'd met the much younger Michael. After her death, her children had contested the will, alleging undue influence, but the case had been dismissed for lack of evidence. Michael Townsend had disappeared shortly after receiving his inheritance. My hands trembled as I continued searching. 2 more obituaries followed the same pattern in different states. Wealthy older women who'd married younger men, died unexpectedly, and left everything to their new husbands, who subsequently vanished. The faces in the photographs, while deliberately obscured or altered with different styling, all belonged to the man who had just married my daughter. The sound of small footsteps interrupted my thoughts. Jamie stood in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Grandma Lucy? I had a bad dream. I quickly minimized the browser windows, showing funeral photos. Come here, sweetheart. He climbed onto my lap, his small body warm against mine. I dreamed that the bad man took Mommy away, and we couldn't find her. I hugged him tightly, my heart racing. It was just a dream. Your mom is safe. But as I comforted my grandson, I wasn't certain those words were true. The pattern I'd uncovered suggested Andrew, or Michael, or whatever his real name was, specialized in one thing: marrying women, isolating them from family, and then ensuring they met untimely ends once he secured their assets. And he had just married my daughter. The question was no longer whether to intervene, but how quickly I could gather enough evidence to convince Kathleen of the danger before she left for her honeymoon cruise the next day. I held Jamie closer, making a silent promise. I had failed to protect my daughter from this predator once. I would not fail again. Dawn found me still at my desk, eyes gritty from lack of sleep, but mind sharp with purpose. I'd spent the night compiling what information I could find, creating a timeline of Andrew's apparent identities and suspected victims. It wasn't proof that would stand in court, but the pattern was undeniable to my trained eye. Jamie appeared at 7:30, still in his dinosaur pajamas, seemingly recovered from the previous night's distress. Pancakes? I offered, closing my laptop before he could glimpse the disturbing research. He nodded enthusiastically. With chocolate chips? Is there any other kind? I replied with a forced lightness I didn't feel. As he sat at the counter watching me mix batter, I weighed my options. Kathleen and Andrew were scheduled to leave for their 2-week Caribbean cruise at 3 p.m. If I approached her with my suspicions without irrefutable evidence, I risked pushing her further into Andrew's arms. My daughter had inherited my stubborn streak, and few things cemented her resolve like being told she was making a mistake. Jamie, I began carefully, that wallet you saw yesterday, did you notice anything else about it? Anything at all? He considered this seriously while licking chocolate from his fingers. It was blue, and it had lots of cards, and there was a paper with numbers on it. Numbers? I flipped a pancake, keeping my tone conversational. Like a phone number? No, like, he furrowed his brow, like when Mommy checks her bank app. Big numbers with commas, account numbers possibly, or financial figures. Either way, potentially crucial information. You have a good memory, I told him, sliding a plate of pancakes across the counter. Mommy says I notice too many things sometimes. He drowned his breakfast in syrup. She says that's why I get worried a lot. I recalled the way Andrew had immediately suggested Jamie needed professional help for noticing inconsistencies in his stepfather's presentation. Classic gaslighting, making someone doubt their own perceptions. Noticing things is a superpower, I assured him. It's what makes you special. As Jamie ate, I formulated a plan. I couldn't prevent Kathleen from leaving on her honeymoon, but I could use those 2 weeks to build a case strong enough to convince her when she returned. I needed hard evidence. Proof of Andrew's previous identities, financial records, anything concrete that couldn't be dismissed as a concerned mother's imagination. My phone chimed with a text from Kathleen. Picking up Jamie at 11. Need to finish packing. Everything okay? I replied, all fine. Jamie slept well. See you at 11. 3 hours. Not much time, but enough to set certain wheels in motion. After getting Jamie dressed in fresh clothes, I kept at my house for his visits. I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Martin Prescott, a private investigator who had worked with me on numerous fraud cases before my retirement. Lucy Miller, he greeted warmly. To what do I owe this resurrection from professional death? I need your services, Martin. Urgently and discreetly. The last time you said that, we ended up tracking offshore accounts in the Caymans, he remarked. I'm intrigued. I gave him a condensed version of my concerns and the limited information I'd gathered. I need everything you can find on Andrew Parker, who might also be Michael Townsend, and possibly other identities. Focus on connections to deceased wealthy women. Jesus, Lucy, he muttered. Your daughter married this guy? Yesterday, I confirmed grimly. They leave for a cruise this afternoon. 2 weeks at sea, effectively unreachable. That's not ideal. Martin's tone turned professional. I'll start digging immediately. Financial records, real estate transactions, death certificates for the suspected victims. Anything else? His best man, Drake. No last name that I caught, but he seems to be part of whatever operation this is. And I need it all fast, Martin. When they return from this cruise, I want enough evidence to convince Kathleen immediately. Understood. I'll be in touch. He paused. Lucy, be careful. If this guy is what you suspect, he's dangerous. My second call was to Judge Sandra Wilson, not just a former colleague, but a close friend who had remained on the bench after I'd retired. Sandy, I need a favor, I said, after exchanging pleasantries. A confidential one. Those are always the most interesting kind, she replied. What's going on, Lucy? I explained the situation, including my fear that Andrew might attempt to access Jamie's trust fund. I need to know if there are any legal mechanisms to temporarily freeze or protect those assets without Kathleen's knowledge, I concluded, just until I can determine whether my suspicions are justified. That's complicated, Sandy said thoughtfully. Without concrete evidence of wrongdoing and with Kathleen being the legal trustee, she sighed. Let me consult with a colleague in family court. There might be a way to place a monitoring hold. It wouldn't prevent withdrawals, but it would flag any unusual activity and require additional verification. That would be perfect, I said, relief evident in my voice. I don't want to restrict Kathleen's legitimate access, just protect Jamie's inheritance from potential exploitation. I'll see what I can do, Sandy promised. But Lucy, if this man is as sophisticated as you suspect, he'll have covered his tracks carefully. Be prepared for that. After hanging up, I found Jamie in the living room, unusually quiet as he arranged his toy dinosaurs in a protective circle. Everything okay, sweetheart? I asked, sitting beside him. Mommy's going away for a long time, he said, not looking up. With him. The simple statement held volumes of anxiety. 2 weeks isn't so long, I assured him, though it felt like an eternity under the circumstances. And you'll be staying with me, having adventures every day. He finally met my eyes. What if she doesn't come back? The question pierced my heart, not just because of a child's separation anxiety, but because my research had raised the same terrifying possibility. 3 previous wives had met unexpected ends after marrying the man now known as Andrew Parker. What made me think Kathleen would be different? Your mom will absolutely come back, I said firmly, pushing away my fears. And while she's gone, you and I are going to be very busy. Doing what? I chose my words carefully. Solving a mystery. But it has to be our secret project. We can't tell anyone, not even your mom right now. Can you be my special detective assistant? His eyes widened with interest. Like Sherlock Holmes? Exactly like that. I smoothed his hair, buying time to frame my next question appropriately for a 6-year-old. Jamie, if you had to find that wallet again, do you think you could? He considered this seriously. Maybe, if it's still under the table at the hotel. An idea formed. Risky, but potentially valuable. The wedding venue would be cleaning up today. If the wallet had been left behind in the chaos of the reception. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. 11 o'clock already. That must be your mom, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. But when I opened the front door, it wasn't Kathleen who stood on my porch. It was Andrew, alone, his charming smile firmly in place despite the cold calculation in his eyes. Lucy, he greeted smoothly. I thought I'd pick up Jamie personally, give us a chance to bond before his mother and I leave for our honeymoon. Behind me, I heard Jamie's small intake of breath, followed by the sound of him retreating further into the house. Andrew's smile never wavered, but his eyes tracked the movement, then returned to mine with unmistakable challenge. May I come in? He asked, though he was already stepping across the threshold. The predator had come to my door, and I had precisely no evidence yet to stop whatever he had planned. Of course, I stepped aside, years of professional training allowing me to maintain a neutral expression despite the alarm bells clanging in my mind. Jamie's just finishing breakfast. I wasn't expecting you instead of Kathleen. Andrew moved into my living room with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to being welcomed everywhere. He wore casual designer clothes, expensive jeans, a tailored button-down, and a watch that probably cost more than my car. The perfect wealthy stepfather image. Kathleen's finalizing some packing details, he explained, glancing around my home with poorly disguised assessment. I thought this would give Jamie and me some one-on-one time before we leave. His eyes lingered on my dining room table, where thankfully I'd closed my laptop and gathered my notes. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Just a quiet morning after the excitement of the wedding, I replied, moving subtly to position myself between him and the hallway that led to where Jamie had retreated. Coffee? Please. In the kitchen, I deliberately took my time preparing 2 cups, using these precious moments to compose myself. Andrew's unexpected arrival was not coincidental. He wanted something, information, reassurance that I hadn't recognized him, or perhaps simply to evaluate whether I posed a threat to his plans. When I returned with the coffee, he had made himself comfortable on my sofa, scrolling through his phone with apparent casualness. "Beautiful ceremony yesterday," I commented, handing him a mug. "Though I noticed several of your relatives couldn't make it." A tiny test. According to the wedding program, Andrew's parents were deceased and his only sister lived abroad. Convenient explanations for their absence. "Yes, Elizabeth's humanitarian work in Sudan made travel impossible," he replied smoothly. "She sent her love, of course." I sipped my coffee, noting how easily the lie came to him. My overnight research had turned up no record of any living siblings. "Jamie seemed upset last night," Andrew continued, changing the subject. "Kathleen mentioned he had a headache, but I wondered if there might be more to it." So here it was, the reason for his visit. He wanted to determine what Jamie had told me. "Children can be overwhelmed by big events," I offered neutrally. "Jamie's sensitive. He picks up on emotions around him." Andrew nodded with manufactured sympathy. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you, Lucy. As Jamie's grandmother, you obviously have significant influence in his life, and I respect that." His eyes, cold despite his warm tone, held mine. "But as his new stepfather, I want to ensure we're providing consistent guidance, especially regarding any anxieties he might express." The implied threat was clear. He was establishing dominance over Jamie's narrative. "Of course," I agreed mildly. "Consistency is important for children." "Exactly." Andrew leaned forward, his mask of charm firmly in place. "Which is why I'm concerned about encouraging any unusual fears or suspicions he might have. Children his age often struggle to distinguish between imagination and reality. Indulging those confusions can be harmful." I thought of the wallet Jamie had seen, concrete evidence that was decidedly not imagination, and maintained my pleasant expression with effort. "In my professional experience," I replied, letting the reference to my career subtly remind him of my background in analyzing deceptive behavior. "Children are remarkably perceptive. They notice inconsistencies that adults often miss." Something flickered across Andrew's face, a momentary crack in his performance. "Yes, your background in psychology. Kathleen mentioned that. Fascinating field. Forensic psychology specifically," I clarified. "I specialized in confidence schemes and fraud detection before retirement. The patterns of deception are quite distinctive once you know what to look for." Our eyes locked in silent combat, my deliberate message received if his slightly tightened jaw was any indication. "Grandma Lucy?" Jamie's small voice broke the tension. He stood in the doorway, watching Andrew warily. "I'm thirsty." "Come here, buddy." Andrew's voice transformed, becoming warm and inviting as he patted the sofa beside him. "I came to pick you up specially. Excited for your 2 weeks with Grandma while Mom and I are on our trip?" Jamie remained rooted in the doorway. "I want some juice, please." I moved toward the kitchen. "I'll get it, sweetheart." "I'm not ready to go yet," Jamie announced, following me and leaving Andrew alone in the living room. In the kitchen, Jamie pressed close to my side. "I don't want to go with him," he whispered. "I know," I murmured, pouring apple juice while keeping my voice low. "But we need to be smart, remember? Like detectives." I knelt to his level. "Right now, the best plan is for you to go home and pack your things for staying with me. I'll come pick you up later before your mom leaves, okay?" He nodded solemnly, trusting me despite his obvious reluctance. When we returned to the living room, Andrew was examining a photograph on my mantel. Kathleen, Richard, and Jamie at the beach 2 years ago, before Richard's heart attack. "Such a lovely family," Andrew commented, replacing the frame. "Kathleen was devastated when she lost Richard. She told me how grateful she was for your support during that time." "We supported each other," I replied, watching as he checked his expensive watch. "We should get going, Jamie. Your mom's waiting, and we have a lot to do before the ship sails." Andrew extended his hand with the confident expectation of compliance. After a hesitant glance at me, Jamie reluctantly moved to his side. "I'll bring his overnight bag later today," I said, walking them to the door. "Around 1? That should give you time to pack his things for the extended stay." "Perfect," Andrew agreed. At the threshold, he paused. "Oh, I meant to ask, did Jamie happen to find anything unusual at the reception? One of my colleagues thinks he lost his wallet during the event. The casual question, delivered with practiced indifference, confirmed everything. He was fishing to determine whether Jamie had shown me the wallet with his alternate identity. Not that he mentioned, I lied smoothly. But I can ask around if you'd like. Don't trouble yourself, Andrew replied. It'll turn up. As they walked toward his sleek black Audi parked in my driveway, Jamie looked back at me, his small face tight with anxiety. I gave him a reassuring nod, trying to convey confidence I didn't entirely feel. Once they'd driven away, I immediately called Martin. Our timeline just accelerated, I told him without preamble. Andrew made a special trip to collect Jamie and assess whether I'm a threat. He specifically asked about a lost wallet. That's not good, Martin replied, the sound of typing in the background. I'm already finding concerning patterns, Lucy. 3 previous marriages to wealthy women in different states, all under different names. All 3 wives died within 18 months of the wedding. My blood ran cold. Causes of death? 2 accidents. 1 car crash, 1 fall downstairs, 1 apparent suicide, though the family contested it. In each case, he inherited substantial assets before disappearing. I need everything you can get on those cases, I insisted, and I need it before 3 o'clock today. That's ambitious. It's necessary, I countered. They leave on a cruise ship this afternoon, 2 weeks at sea, largely unreachable. I don't intend to let Kathleen board that ship with him. After hanging up, I moved quickly to my study, pulling up my email to check if Judge Wilson had responded with information about protecting Jamie's trust fund. Nothing yet. Time was running out, and I still lacked the concrete evidence I'd need to convince Kathleen that her charming new husband was actually a predator with a history of dead wives. And something told me that if Andrew suspected I was closing in on the truth, he wouldn't wait for the cruise to eliminate the threat I posed. The framed photograph of Kathleen and Richard seemed to watch me from my desk, a painful reminder of what was at stake. I hadn't been able to prevent Richard's death, a genuine tragedy that had broken my daughter's heart. But I would not stand by and watch as a calculating killer led her into danger, one carefully constructed lie at a time. I grabbed my car keys. If Andrew thought his visit had intimidated me into inaction, he was about to discover that underestimating Lucy Miller was a serious miscalculation. My first stop was the Rosewood Hotel, where the aftermath of Kathleen and Andrew's wedding reception was still evident in the ballroom. Staff moved efficiently among the tables, dismantling decorations and clearing leftover glassware. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the area is closed for cleaning," a young employee informed me as I tried to enter. I manufactured my most convincing smile. "I understand completely. I'm Lucy Miller, mother of the bride from yesterday's wedding. My grandson left his medication under one of the tables, and we need it rather urgently." The lie came easily, justified by the stakes. The young man hesitated, then nodded sympathetically. "I can help you look. Which table was it?" "The head table," I replied, already moving in that direction. He was playing underneath it during the reception. The white linen had been removed, the ornate table now bare as it awaited transport back to storage. I knelt beside it, ignoring the twinge in my knees as I examined the carpet underneath. Nothing. "Are you sure it was this table?" the employee asked. I straightened, disappointment washing through me. "It must have been found already, perhaps by the cleaning crew?" "You could check with lost and found at the front desk," he suggested. "All items recovered during cleanup are taken there." At the front desk, a polished young woman listened attentively to my inquiry about a lost wallet, though I carefully avoided mentioning names or specific identification. "We did have a wallet turned in from the Parker Miller wedding," she confirmed, consulting her computer. "But it was claimed early this morning by a member of the wedding party." "A tall man with dark hair?" I asked. "The best man, perhaps?" She nodded. "That's right. He had identification confirming he was the owner. Drake." Of course, Andrew wouldn't retrieve it himself. Too risky to be associated with the evidence of his dual identity. He'd sent his accomplice instead. I thanked her and left, frustration building. The physical evidence had slipped through my fingers. Without the wallet, I had only Jamie's testimony and my incomplete research, not enough to convince Kathleen to cancel her honeymoon with a man she believed she loved. In my car, I called Martin again. "Please tell me you found something concrete." "Working on it," he replied, the strain in his voice evident. "I've identified his pattern. He operates on a precise timeline, identifies wealthy targets, usually recent widows or divorcees with assets, establishes a new identity in their social circle, pursues a whirlwind romance, marries quickly, and then begins isolating them from family and friends. And then they die, I concluded grimly. Not immediately, Martin clarified. First comes financial consolidation, joint accounts, revised wills, sometimes liquidating assets for investment opportunities. The deaths occur after he's secured legal access to everything. But Kathleen isn't wealthy like Richard was, I pointed out. Comfortable, yes, but not rich enough to justify this elaborate scheme. That's what's interesting, Martin replied. Your daughter fits the profile in every way except one. She's younger than his usual targets. Most were in their 50s or 60s, with decades of accumulated wealth. So what's different about Kathleen? I wondered aloud. A chill running through me as the answer materialized. Jamie's trust fund. $2 million, inaccessible to anyone but him until he's 25, unless his guardians approve early distributions for education or health needs. And with your son-in-law's suggestion that Jamie needs psychological help, Martin trailed off, the implication clear. He's planning to drain the trust through fraudulent treatment expenses, I finished, using a supposed psychological issue as justification. It fits his pattern, Martin agreed. I'm still compiling documentation from the previous cases, but there's something else you should know. In each instance, he worked with accomplices, individuals who posed as financial advisors, healthcare providers, or legal counsel to facilitate the fraud. Like Drake, I said, recalling the best man's calculating gaze. Exactly. I'm running background on everyone associated with the wedding party. Meanwhile, I've sent you what I've compiled so far on his previous identities. It's not complete, but it's something. I cut in, checking the time. 12:45 already. I'm heading to Kathleen's now. Keep digging, especially on the previous wives' deaths. I need something irrefutable before they leave at 3. Kathleen's house, the beautiful modernist home she'd shared with Richard and now with Andrew, sat on a quiet street in the upscale lakeside neighborhood. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Andrew's Audi was missing, though Kathleen's SUV remained parked in its usual spot. Jamie opened the door before I could ring the bell, his face brightening with relief at the sight of me. Grandma Lucy, you came. Of course I did, I assured him, stepping inside. Where's your mom? Upstairs, packing, he reported. Andrew left to get something from his office. He said he'd be back at 2. A small window of opportunity. Is your bag ready for staying with me? Jamie nodded, pointing to his backpack and small suitcase by the door. I packed extra underwear like you always tell me to. Despite everything, I smiled. Good man. Now I need to talk to your mom alone for a few minutes. Can you play in your room while we have a grown-up conversation? His eyes, so perceptive for his age, searched mine. Are you going to tell her about the wallet? I'm going to tell her some important things, I replied carefully. And I need you to stay upstairs until I call you, okay? He nodded solemnly and headed up the stairs, casting one anxious glance back before disappearing into his bedroom. I found Kathleen in the master suite, folding summer dresses into an expensive suitcase spread across the king-sized bed. She looked up with a smile that faltered slightly at my expression. Mom, is everything okay? You look serious. We need to talk, I said, closing the bedroom door behind me. About Andrew. Her smile disappeared entirely. Please don't start this. It's my wedding trip, Mom. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't critically important, I assured her, perching on the edge of the bed. Kathleen, there are things about Andrew that don't add up, concerning things. She sighed, setting down the sundress she'd been folding. Like what? Like the fact that his identity, Andrew Parker, only has records going back 5 years. Or the fact that he's been previously married at least 3 times under different names, each time to wealthy women who died unexpectedly within 18 months of the wedding. Kathleen's face flushed with anger. What are you talking about? Have you been investigating my husband? After what Jamie saw at the reception, yes, I admitted. Kathleen, Jamie found a wallet under the head table containing identification for a Michael Townsend, with Andrew's photo, but a different name. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Jamie has an active imagination, and you're encouraging it. Andrew warned me you might try something like this. Of course he had. He'd been laying groundwork to discredit me from the beginning. Warned you? Kathleen, think about it. Why would he anticipate objections unless he was hiding something? Because he knows how overprotective you are, she retorted. How you've never thought anyone was good enough for me, not even Richard at first. That stung, because it contained a grain of truth. I had been skeptical of Richard initially, though for entirely different reasons than my concerns about Andrew. "I have evidence," I said, pulling out my phone to access the files Martin had sent. 3 previous wives, all dead under suspicious circumstances, all after he'd gained control of their finances. Kathleen stood abruptly. "I want you to leave. Now." "Please, just look at this," I urged, holding out my phone. "No." Her voice was ice. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this stops now. Andrew loves me. We're building a life together, and I won't let your paranoia ruin my happiness again." "Again?" I echoed, confused. "You did the same thing with Richard," she accused, questioned his intentions, suggested he was using me to advance his career. "And you were wrong then, too." I remembered those early concerns, normal maternal caution that had proven unfounded as Richard demonstrated his genuine love for Kathleen. But this was entirely different. "This isn't about me not approving of your choice," I insisted. "This is about evidence of a pattern of criminal behavior." A key turned in the front door downstairs. "That's Andrew," Kathleen said, her expression hardening. "I think you should go before this gets any more uncomfortable." Time had run out. Andrew was home, and I'd failed to convince Kathleen. "Fine," I agreed, standing. "But please, just promise me one thing. Don't sign anything while you're on this cruise. No financial documents, no changes to your will, nothing until you return and can have your own lawyer review it." Something in my tone must have reached her, because her expression softened slightly. "Is that what this is really about? You're worried he's after my money?" "I'm worried he's after Jamie's trust fund," I corrected. "And I'm terrified about what might happen to you once he secures access to it." Before she could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs, and Andrew's voice called out cheerfully, "Honey, I'm back." Kathleen gave me a final complicated look, part anger, part doubt, before moving past me to greet her husband. I followed, knowing I'd lost this round but determined not to give up the fight. One way or another, I would protect my family from the predator who had infiltrated it, even if they couldn't yet see the danger themselves. Andrew's smile faltered momentarily when he saw me at the top of the stairs, but he recovered quickly, his mask of charm sliding back into place. "Lucy, I didn't realize you were here already." His tone was pleasant, but his eyes held warning. "Just picking up Jamie," I replied, with equally false brightness, "and checking that Kathleen has everything she needs for the cruise." He ascended the stairs, placing a possessive arm around my daughter's waist. "All packed, honey?" Kathleen nodded, her expression carefully neutral as she glanced between us. "Almost done. I've got something for you," Andrew announced, producing a small jewelry box from his pocket. A bon voyage gift. Kathleen's face softened as she opened it, revealing a pair of diamond earrings that must have cost thousands. "They're beautiful. Only the best for my wife," he declared, watching me over her shoulder as she embraced him. The message was clear. "See how generous I am, how much I treasure her." I maintained my composure with effort. This, too, fit the pattern Martin had identified. Lavish gifts to reinforce the devoted husband image, particularly when the relationship was threatened. Emotional manipulation through materialism. "I should get Jamie's things to the car," I said, needing a moment away from Andrew's calculating presence. "I'll help," he offered immediately, following me downstairs before I could object. In the foyer, out of Kathleen's earshot, his demeanor changed. Kathleen seemed upset when I arrived. "Anything I should know about?" The question was delivered casually, but the threat behind it was unmistakable. "Just pre-trip jitters," I replied, matching his tone. "First time away from Jamie since Richard died." He studied me, obviously unconvinced. "You know, Lucy, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about your background in fraud detection. Fascinating field indeed. I imagine it might lead to certain professional deformations, seeing patterns where none exist." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "Though in my experience, when something appears inconsistent, there's usually a reason. The mind seeks narrative cohesion," he countered smoothly, "even at the expense of reality sometimes." We were speaking in civilized code, each understanding perfectly what the other meant. He was suggesting I was paranoid. I was letting him know I was onto him. "How long did you say you've been an investment consultant?" I asked, changing tactics. "Your firm seems quite successful." A flicker of annoyance crossed his features. 7 years now, though I've been in finance much longer." Another lie. My research showed Parker Financial Services had been incorporated exactly 5 years ago, with minimal legitimate activity. Jamie appeared at the top of the stairs, saving Andrew from further questioning. "Grandma Lucy, I found my dinosaur book to bring." "Perfect," I called up, grateful for the interruption. "Come down, sweetheart. We should let your mom and Andrew finish getting ready." As Jamie descended, Andrew crouched to his level, voice warm with fabricated affection. "We're going to miss you, buddy, but when we get back, we'll have lots of fun together. Maybe even look into that special camp I told you about." Jamie's eyes flicked to mine briefly, anxiety evident. "What special camp?" "A place for exceptional kids like you," Andrew explained, "with doctors who help children understand their feelings better. We can talk more about it when I get back." The implied threat couldn't have been clearer to me. He was already laying groundwork for accessing Jamie's trust through fraudulent treatment expenses and isolating him from my influence in the process. "That sounds premature," I interjected mildly. "Jamie seems perfectly well adjusted to me." Andrew straightened, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Just exploring options. After all, blended families come with unique challenges." Kathleen joined us, wheeling her suitcase. "All set. The car service should be here any minute to take us to the port." Right on cue, a black town car pulled into the driveway. Andrew moved immediately to load their luggage, leaving me a brief moment alone with my daughter. "Please be careful," I urged quietly, "and call me if anything feels wrong, anything at all." Kathleen's expression softened slightly. "Mom, I know you're concerned, but you're wrong about Andrew. He's been nothing but supportive and loving. Just promise you'll stay in touch," I insisted. "Regular check-ins." "Of course," she agreed. "We'll have Wi-Fi on the ship. I'll text every day." It wasn't enough, but it was all I could secure. I hugged her tightly, trying to convey everything I couldn't say aloud. "I love you, Kathleen. More than anything." "I love you too, Mom." She pulled back, searching my face. "Try to give him a chance, okay? For me?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without revealing the extent of my fears. Jamie clung to his mother during their goodbye, his small face buried against her middle. "I don't want you to go," he whispered. "It's only 2 weeks, honey," Kathleen assured him, kneeling to his level. "You'll have so much fun with Grandma Lucy. You'll hardly miss me." Andrew interrupted with practiced precision. "We should go, honey. Don't want to miss embarkation." Final hugs were exchanged, Jamie and I standing in the driveway as the town car pulled away. Kathleen waved from the window. Andrew merely nodded in acknowledgement, his gaze calculating to the last. "Is Mommy going to be okay?" Jamie asked, his small hand clutching mine as the car disappeared around the corner. "I'm going to make sure of it," I promised, though uncertainty gnawed at my confidence. Back in my car with Jamie safely buckled in, I called Martin immediately. "They've left for the cruise. I couldn't convince Kathleen. She thinks I'm being paranoid and overprotective." "That's not surprising," Martin replied, his voice strained. "These guys are professionals, Lucy. They anticipate family resistance and prepare for it." "What have you found?" I asked, starting the engine. "A lot, actually. I've identified 6 previous identities, not just 3. This guy's been working the same scheme for nearly a decade, moving between states to avoid detection." He paused, "and I've found his real name, at least the earliest one I can trace. Daniel Colby, originally from Philadelphia." I absorbed this, putting the car in drive. "What about the previous wives' deaths? Any proof of foul play?" "Nothing definitive. That's what makes him so effective. The deaths all appear accidental or natural. No obvious murder, no poison detected in toxicology reports, just convenient tragedies." A chill ran through me. "So what's our next move?" "I have a contact in Miami, retired police detective who investigated the death of wife number 4. He always believed there was more to it, but couldn't prove it. He's sending his unofficial case notes." "Good," I replied, checking the rearview mirror to see Jamie absorbed in his dinosaur book. "And the accomplices? Anything on Drake or others who might be part of the operation?" "Working on it. The pattern suggests a network, not a solo operator. I've identified at least 3 recurring associates who appear in different configurations across the previous cases. Drake is likely Alex Mercer, a former financial advisor whose license was revoked for fraud 5 years ago. I thought of the strange request Andrew had made about a special camp for Jamie. Check for connections to any healthcare facilities or practitioners specializing in childhood psychology or behavioral issues. I think they're planning to use Jamie's supposed psychological needs as a way to access his trust fund." "Will do," Martin agreed. "In the meantime, the cruise ship doesn't sail until 5. They're still in port for another 2 hours, technically reachable if we find something compelling enough to convince Kathleen. I pressed the accelerator slightly. Decision made. I'm dropping Jamie at my neighbor's house and heading to the port. Send whatever you find directly to my phone. I'm going to try one more time before that ship leaves dock. As I made a sharp U-turn, Jamie looked up from his book. Where are we going, Grandma Lucy? To stop a bad man, I replied honestly, like real detectives do. His small face grew serious. Is Mommy in danger? I considered how to answer, balancing honesty against frightening him unnecessarily. Not right now, I said carefully. But Grandma needs to make sure it stays that way. Jamie nodded solemnly. Then you better hurry. From the mouths of babes, I thought grimly, pressing the accelerator further as we raced toward what might be my last chance to save my daughter from the predator she had unwittingly married. The port of Miami's cruise terminal bustled with activity. Passengers streaming aboard massive ships, porters maneuvering luggage carts, families taking last-minute photos before departure. I parked haphazardly in the short-term lot, leaving Mrs. Henderson from next door watching Jamie with explicit instructions to allow no one else to pick him up under any circumstances. The Caribbean Princess dominated the horizon, a floating city preparing for departure. Passengers were still boarding, wheeled luggage in tow, faces bright with vacation anticipation. I checked the time. 4:15. 45 minutes until sailing. My phone buzzed with a message from Martin. Sending critical files now. Former associate from Boston case agreed to testify. Police reopening investigation into wife number 2's accidental fall. Seconds later, my email pinged with a substantial attachment. Evidence compiled over Martin's frantic day of investigation. I scanned it quickly while half jogging toward the terminal, focusing on the most damning components. Financial records showing systematic draining of previous wives' accounts, autopsy reports with subtle inconsistencies highlighted, photographs of Andrew with different names in different cities, always accompanied by wealthy older women who later died under questionable circumstances. Most critically, Martin had included a sworn statement from a former accomplice who had fallen out with Daniel Colby after a disagreement over proceeds from one of the earlier schemes. The testimony detailed their methodology, the network of associates who provided false professional credentials, and Daniel's chilling indifference when discussing his deceased wives. It wouldn't stand up in court yet, but it might be enough to make Kathleen pause. I approached the security checkpoint, breathless. I need to speak with a passenger before the ship departs. It's an emergency. The uniformed agent regarded me skeptically. Do you have a boarding pass, ma'am? No, I'm not traveling. I just need to deliver critical information to my daughter. I'm sorry, but only ticketed passengers can proceed beyond this point, he recited, clearly accustomed to similar requests. Desperation fueled inspiration. My daughter accidentally took her medication in her luggage, medication she needs every 6 hours for a serious heart condition. If I don't get it to her before the ship sails, there could be severe medical consequences. The lie worked. After a brief consultation with his supervisor and a cursory check of my ID, I was escorted through security with a temporary visitor's pass. 30 minutes only, the agent warned. Then you must disembark, with or without locating your party. The ship's interior was a labyrinth of lounges, restaurants, and passageways. I consulted a digital map near the boarding area, searching for the most likely place to find newly embarked passengers. The Lido deck showed a sail-away celebration, beginning at 4:30, my best chance. As I navigated the crowded corridors, my phone buzzed again with a text from Martin. Police contact confirmed Drake Alex Mercer has outstanding warrants in Florida. Sending officer to port now. A small advantage potentially, if I could locate them in time. The Lido deck was already filling with passengers, tropical drinks in hand as they prepared to celebrate departure. I scanned the crowd desperately, searching for Kathleen's blonde hair or Andrew's distinctive profile, and then I saw them. At a corner table near the railing, champagne flutes before them. Andrew was leaning close to Kathleen, his hand covering hers in a gesture that would appear loving to any observer. But from my angle, I could see his expression. Intense, persuasive, nothing like the adoration he affected in public. I approached from behind, catching fragments of their conversation. Just a simple signature, he was saying. The investment opportunity expires while we're at sea, and the returns are guaranteed. 20% minimum. Kathleen looked uncertain. Shouldn't we consult my financial advisor first? Richard always said never to make investment decisions quickly. Andrew's smile tightened fractionally. Do you trust me, Kathleen, as your husband? She hesitated, and in that microscopic pause, I saw my opening. Kathleen, I said, stepping into view. They both startled, Andrew recovering first, his face transforming instantly from irritation to concerned surprise. Lucy, what are you doing here? His tone suggested worry rather than anger. Is Jamie all right? Jamie's fine, I assured Kathleen, whose face had paled at the implication something might have happened to her son. But we need to talk, urgently. Andrew stood, positioning himself slightly between us, a subtle act of control, disguised as protectiveness. Surely whatever it is can wait until we return, Lucy. The ship is about to depart. It can't wait, I insisted, looking directly at Kathleen. And it concerns the document he's asking you to sign right now. Kathleen's eyes widened, darting to the paperwork half hidden beneath Andrew's hand on the table. How did you know about that? Because it's part of his pattern, I said, pulling out my phone. The same pattern he's executed with at least 6 other women before you. Women who are now dead. Andrew's mask slipped momentarily, genuine anger flashing in his eyes before he controlled it. This is beyond inappropriate, Lucy. You're causing a scene based on some delusional... His real name is Daniel Colby, I interrupted, showing Kathleen my phone screen with the earliest photograph Martin had found. A younger version of Andrew, with darker hair, but unmistakably the same man. He's been married at least 6 times in the last decade, each time to wealthy women who died within 18 months of the wedding. After he'd secured control of their assets, Kathleen stared at the photograph, confusion evident in her expression. This doesn't make sense. Andrew, tell her she's wrong. Of course she's wrong, he replied smoothly, though I noticed he was already scanning the deck, likely planning his exit strategy. Your mother has clearly worked herself into some paranoid fantasy. Perhaps she should be the one seeing a psychological specialist, not Jamie. The wallet Jamie found under the table contained identification for Michael Townsend. I pressed on, scrolling to another image Martin had sent. A death certificate for Eleanor Townsend, with her surviving husband Michael listed as next of kin. One of his previous identities. He's a con man, Kathleen, a predator who targets vulnerable women with assets. Andrew's expression hardened as he realized I had actual evidence, not merely suspicions. Kathleen, your mother is unwell. This obsessive behavior, investigating your new husband, creating elaborate conspiracy theories, it suggests serious psychological issues. Then explain the wallet, I challenged. Explain why Jamie saw identification with your photo, but a different name. Kathleen looked between us, doubt finally registering on her face. Andrew? His hesitation was brief, but telling. There's obviously some misunderstanding. Perhaps Jamie saw someone else's wallet and confused. The investment document, I cut in, nodding toward the papers on the table. What exactly are you asking my daughter to sign on the first day of your honeymoon? Kathleen reached for the papers before Andrew could stop her, scanning the dense legal text with growing concern. This authorizes transfer of assets from my accounts to Parker Holdings Limited. In the Cayman Islands? She looked up, confusion turning to the first hints of suspicion. Why would I need to move my money offshore? It's a tax optimization strategy, Andrew explained quickly, his composure slipping further. Completely legitimate. But your mother is deliberately making it sound sinister because she can't accept that you've moved on with your life. I held Kathleen's gaze, willing her to see through his manipulation. The document in your hand is nearly identical to one signed by Margaret Colby before her fatal car accident, by Eleanor Townsend before her suicide, by Jennifer Walsh before she accidentally fell downstairs, all previous wives of the man standing beside you. The ship's horn blasted, the 15-minute warning before departure. Andrew checked his watch, then reached for Kathleen's arm. We can discuss this when we return from our cruise. Lucy clearly needs help, but causing a public spectacle won't solve anything. Kathleen pulled her arm away, her expression hardening. I want to see the rest of the evidence, Mom. I'll show you everything, I promised, relief washing through me at this first sign of her trust. But we need to leave the ship now. It's not safe for you to be alone with him, especially at sea. Andrew's charm disappeared entirely, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. This is your last chance to walk away, Lucy, for your own good. The naked threat confirmed everything. his mask finally slipping to reveal the predator beneath. Kathleen saw it too, her eyes widening as she took an instinctive step away from the man she had married just yesterday. "Who are you?" she whispered. Before he could respond, uniformed security personnel appeared at the entrance to the deck, accompanied by a man in a suit who surveyed the area with professional assessment. Martin's police contact had arrived. Andrew spotted them immediately, his expression calculating as he evaluated his options. The ship's horn sounded again. Last call before departure. "This isn't over," he said quietly, looking directly at me with cold promise. Then he turned and moved swiftly toward the opposite exit, abandoning the pretense entirely. Kathleen stood frozen, the investment document still clutched in her hand as the reality of her situation began to sink in. "Mom? What just happened?" "The beginning of the truth," I replied, putting my arm around her shoulders. "Let's get off this ship. There's a police officer here who needs to speak with us." As we moved toward security, I glanced back at the table where moments ago my daughter had sat with a killer, unknowingly poised at the edge of a trap that had claimed at least 6 women before her. We had won this round, but Andrew, Daniel, had escaped. And something told me he wouldn't simply disappear this time. Not when I had disrupted his careful plans so publicly. The threat wasn't over. It had merely entered a new and potentially more dangerous phase. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of police statements, tearful revelations, and security precautions. We spent hours at the Miami-Dade Police Department, where Kathleen struggled to reconcile the man she had married with the predator described in Martin's meticulously compiled evidence. "I don't understand," she repeated, staring at photographs of Andrew with his previous wives. "How could I not have seen any signs?" Detective Carlos Ramirez, Martin's former colleague who had investigated the death of wife number 4, answered gently. "These types of predators are master manipulators, Mrs. Sullivan. They study their victims, identify vulnerabilities, and present exactly the persona that will be most appealing. I wasn't even wealthy like these other women," Kathleen said, confusion evident in her voice. I exchanged glances with Detective Ramirez. "We believe his primary target may have been Jamie's trust fund," I explained carefully. $2 million, accessible through you as trustee. Comprehension dawned on Kathleen's face, followed by horror. The special camp he kept mentioning for Jamie. The child psychologist friend he wanted Jamie to see. "A common tactic," Ramirez confirmed. "Create a fictitious health or developmental concern, then funnel money through fraudulent treatment facilities controlled by accomplices." Tears welled in Kathleen's eyes. "I brought this monster into our lives, into Jamie's life." I squeezed her hand. "You were targeted by a professional predator who has successfully deceived at least 6 other intelligent, capable women. This isn't your fault." While Kathleen gave her statement, I stepped outside to call my neighbor and check on Jamie. Mrs. Henderson assured me he was fine, currently engaged in a heated dinosaur battle with her grandson, who had come over to keep him company. Martin joined me in the hallway, his expression grim despite our apparent victory. "They haven't found him. He vanished from the ship before security could locate him." "What about Drake? Alex Mercer?" I asked. "In custody. He was trying to leave the port when officers apprehended him. He's already negotiating for leniency in exchange for information. Will it be enough to ensure Andrew, Daniel, is prosecuted if they find him?" Martin hesitated. "It's complicated. Each case was in a different jurisdiction, with different circumstances. Building a comprehensive case that connects all the deaths will take time." I absorbed this reality with growing unease. So he could still escape justice. Possibly. But his network is compromised, his current identity exposed. He'll have to start over completely. Martin's expression softened slightly. "You saved your daughter, Lucy. That's what matters most." Later that evening, we checked into a Miami hotel, under police protection while arrangements were made for our return to Chicago. Kathleen sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the wall while I ordered room service for us both. "I loved him," she said quietly after I hung up the phone. "Or thought I did. How can I trust my own judgment after this?" I sat beside her, choosing my words carefully. "You trusted your instincts when it mattered most. When I showed you the evidence, you didn't dismiss it. You were open to the truth, even though it was painful." She leaned against my shoulder, seeming suddenly much younger than her 38 years. I keep thinking about all the little inconsistencies I rationalized away. the vague answers about his past, the way he sometimes watched me when he thought I wasn't looking, not lovingly, but assessing. Predators count on our tendency to dismiss those instinctual warnings, I said, to choose the explanation that allows us to maintain our preferred narrative. Jamie saw through him immediately, Kathleen noted with a sad smile. Children haven't yet learned to ignore their intuition. The mention of Jamie brought a renewed sense of urgency. We should get back to Chicago as soon as possible. I don't like having him so far away, even with protection in place. Do you think Andrew, Daniel, whatever his name is, would try to reach Jamie? Alarm sharpened her voice. I don't know, I admitted, but I'd rather not take chances. Detective Ramirez had arranged for police escorts to the airport the following morning and notified Chicago authorities to maintain surveillance on my home where Mrs. Henderson was still watching Jamie. But protection details couldn't last indefinitely. Eventually, we would have to return to normal life, even with a dangerous man potentially seeking revenge. My phone rang. Martin again. Drake's talking, he reported without preamble. And it's worse than we thought. Apparently, Daniel's operation is larger than anyone suspected. He has at least 2 other active identities in different states, with different accomplices. A parallel operation? I clarified, stepping into the bathroom so Kathleen wouldn't overhear this disturbing development. Exactly. And Drake claims he doesn't know the details of these other operations. They're compartmentalized for security. But he did confirm our suspicion that some of the previous wives' deaths were deliberate, though carefully staged to appear accidental. A chill ran through me. Murder for profit. Drake is willing to testify that Daniel directly caused at least 2 deaths, Jennifer Walsh's fall and Eleanor Townsend's suicide. But without physical evidence, it's still largely circumstantial. What about financial records? There must be a paper trail showing where the money went after each death. That's the other bombshell, Martin continued. According to Drake, there's a central repository of all their documentation. Insurance policies, wills, bank transfers, everything that would definitively link all the cases together and prove premeditation. Where? Drake claims not to know the exact location, says Daniel never trusted anyone with all the pieces, but it's somewhere in Chicago, which suggests Daniel may be headed back there. The implications were immediate and disturbing. If Daniel returned to Chicago, he'd be in the same city as Jamie, the only eyewitness who could directly connect him to his Michael Townsend identity. We're coming home first thing tomorrow, I told Martin. Have you informed Detective Ramirez about this development? Yes, he's arranging for continued protection until you're back in Chicago, and he's coordinating with authorities there to locate the documentation cache Drake mentioned. If we find it, we'd have everything needed to ensure Daniel never threatens another woman again, I finished. After ending the call, I stood motionless in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared composed, determined, nothing like the turmoil I felt inside. In the span of 48 hours, I had exposed a serial predator, potentially saved my daughter's life, and now faced the possibility that a murderer might be heading toward my grandson, with revenge on his mind. When I rejoined Kathleen in the bedroom, she was scrolling through her phone, her expression a mixture of determination and disgust. I'm going through all my accounts, she explained without looking up, changing passwords, checking for any unauthorized access. He had my phone password. God knows what financial information he might have already gathered. Good thinking, I commended her, not sharing my newest concerns just yet. One crisis at a time. Room service arrived with our dinner, but neither of us had much appetite. As night fell over Miami, we sat in uneasy silence, each lost in our own thoughts about the man who had so nearly succeeded in his predatory scheme, and who was still out there somewhere, perhaps already planning his next move. Or worse, his revenge. The Chicago skyline appeared through the airplane window, familiar yet somehow altered, like everything else in our lives since Jamie's whispered warning at the wedding reception. During our flight, I had briefed Kathleen on the latest developments from Martin's investigation, including the disturbing possibility that Daniel might return to Chicago in search of his documentation cache. So we're flying directly toward a potential confrontation, Kathleen observed, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. With significantly more protection in place, I assured her, and the advantage of knowing what we're facing, while he doesn't realize how much we've uncovered. Upon landing, We were met by a plainclothes detective from the Chicago Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Sarah Walsh, no relation to Daniel's third wife, she clarified grimly, had been assigned as our liaison. "We have officers stationed at your residence, Dr. Miller," she informed me as we walked briskly through the terminal. "And additional surveillance at your home, Mrs. Sullivan. So far, no sign of Daniel Colby or any of his known associates." "And Jamie?" Kathleen asked immediately. "Is he safe?" "Your son is still with Mrs. Henderson as arranged, with an officer positioned nearby. We thought maintaining his routine would be less frightening than a formal protective custody situation." I nodded appreciation. "What about the search for Daniel's documentation repository?" "We're working on that," Detective Walsh replied. "Based on information from Drake, or Alex Mercer as we know him, we've identified several possible locations: commercial storage facilities, safety deposit boxes, even a private office Daniel maintained under yet another alias." In the secure police vehicle that transported us from the airport, Kathleen stared out the window at the familiar streets of Chicago, her expression hollow. "I keep thinking about the moment I said, 'I do,'" she confessed quietly. "How happy I felt, how certain I was that I'd found someone to build a life with after Richard." I squeezed her hand, having no words that could adequately address the magnitude of her betrayal. My brilliant, capable daughter had been systematically deceived by a practiced predator, a man who had likely already been planning her demise, even as he'd pledged eternal love. "I want to see Jamie first," Kathleen decided as we approached the city center. "Before we go home or talk to more police, I need to hold my son." Detective Walsh nodded understanding and redirected our driver toward Mrs. Henderson's address in my neighborhood. "We'll maintain the escort. Standard procedure until we have Colby in custody." Mrs. Henderson's modest bungalow looked exactly as it always had. Flower boxes blooming with petunias, American flag by the door, worn welcome mat proclaiming, "Wipe your paws." The normality of it provided strange comfort after days of extraordinary danger. Jamie burst through the front door before we had fully exited the police vehicle, his small body launching into Kathleen's arms with such force she staggered slightly. "Mommy, you came back early!" His face radiated joy, then shifted to confusion as he noticed the police presence. "Why are there police cars?" "They're helping us with something important," Kathleen explained, holding him tightly. "Did you have fun with Mrs. Henderson?" "We made cookies and watched dinosaur movies," he reported. "And her grandson Tyler showed me his rock collection." His expression grew serious as he lowered his voice. "Did you find out about the bad man?" Kathleen met my eyes over Jamie's head, the painful confirmation of his perceptiveness evident in her gaze. "Yes, honey. Grandma Lucy helped us discover the truth." Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her kind face. "Come inside, all of you. Standing out here is just asking for neighborhood gossip." Once inside, with Jamie settled in the kitchen enjoying milk and leftover cookies under Mrs. Henderson's supervision, Detective Walsh outlined the immediate security plan. "We recommend you both stay at a single location for now. Easier to secure than two separate residences. Dr. Miller's home would be preferable, as it's already under surveillance." Kathleen nodded agreement. "We'll need to collect some things from my house first. I'll arrange an escort," Walsh assured her. "In the meantime, I should update you on a development from Miami. Drake, Alex Mercer, has provided additional information about Daniel's documentation repository in exchange for consideration in his case." My attention sharpened. "What information?" "He claims all records are kept in a storage unit registered under the name Thomas Griffith, another of Daniel's aliases. The unit contains evidence from every operation, financial documents, identity papers, even planning materials for what he euphemistically called exit strategies for his wives." "Exit strategies," Kathleen repeated hollowly. "Murder plans, you mean?" Walsh nodded grimly. "We're obtaining warrants for all storage facilities in the greater Chicago area, cross-referencing with the identity information Drake provided. It's only a matter of time before we locate it." "And Daniel himself?" I pressed. "Any indication of his whereabouts?" "Not yet, but he's lost his support network, his current identity is compromised, and law enforcement in multiple states is looking for him. His options are limited." I wasn't comforted. Men like Daniel, cornered and desperate, became unpredictable and potentially more dangerous. After Walsh departed with promises to return with updates, Kathleen and I joined Jamie in the kitchen. Watching him cheerfully explain his dinosaur drawings to Mrs. Henderson, the reality of how close we'd come to disaster, struck me anew. If not for his chance discovery of that wallet, Kathleen might now be at sea with a murderer, potentially never to return. "We should go collect your things," I suggested to Kathleen. "Get settled at my place before dark." She nodded, though her gaze remained fixed on Jamie. "I can't believe that I could have—" Words failed her. "But you didn't," I reminded her gently. "We caught it in time, and now we'll make sure he never threatens anyone again." The police escort to Kathleen's house, the modernist home she had shared with Richard and briefly with Daniel, arrived promptly. As we prepared to leave, Jamie tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma Lucy, is the bad man gone forever now?" I crouched to his level, weighing honesty against reassurance. "Not yet, sweetheart, but a lot of good people are working very hard to find him and make sure he can't hurt anyone else." "Because of what I saw under the table?" "That's right. You noticed something important that grown-ups missed. You were very brave to tell me about it." His small face grew serious. "I knew he was bad the first time I met him." He smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. "From the mouths of babes," I thought again, marveling at the unfiltered perceptiveness of children, their ability to recognize inconsistencies that adults had learned to rationalize away. As we drove toward Kathleen's house, flanked by unmarked police vehicles, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Everything seemed to be proceeding according to plan. Daniel's network exposed, evidence being gathered, protection in place for our family. Yet something felt wrong, like the investigative equivalent of the prickling sensation Jamie had described when first meeting Daniel, an intuitive warning that not everything was as it appeared. I stared out the window at the familiar streets of Chicago, wondering what critical detail we might still be missing, and whether we would identify it before Daniel made his next move. Kathleen's house stood elegant and imposing against the late afternoon sky, its modernist lines and expansive windows a testament to Richard's architectural preferences. As we approached, escorted by two plainclothes officers, I couldn't shake my growing sense of disquiet. "Something feels wrong," I murmured to Kathleen as we paused at the front walk. She glanced at me, concern flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" I scanned the property, noting nothing obviously amiss. "I'm not sure, just intuition." One of the officers, Detective Parker, ironically sharing a surname with Daniel's latest false identity, spoke into his radio, confirming the house had been checked earlier and found secure. "We'll do another sweep before you enter," he assured us, gesturing for his partner to circle around back while he approached the front door. I remained on the walkway with Kathleen, both of us watching intently as Detective Parker unlocked the door using the key we'd provided and disappeared inside. Minutes later, his voice crackled through his partner's radio. "All clear on the main floor and upstairs, moving to the basement." Kathleen exhaled slowly. "Maybe I should wait to do this. We could buy whatever we need for tonight and come back tomorrow. We're here now, with police protection," I reasoned, though my own unease hadn't subsided. "Let's get what you need and leave quickly." When Detective Parker emerged to signal the all clear, we entered the house cautiously. Everything appeared exactly as Kathleen had left it 2 days earlier when departing for what should have been her honeymoon cruise, a coffee mug still on the kitchen counter, wedding gifts stacked neatly in the dining room, a half-packed suitcase in the master bedroom that Daniel had never finished organizing before our confrontation. "I'll just grab some clothes and Jamie's comfort items," Kathleen decided, heading upstairs while I remained in the kitchen with Detective Parker. "The other officer is maintaining perimeter security," he explained, peering through the windows at the manicured backyard. "Standard procedure." I nodded, moving toward the refrigerator to check for perishables that might need to be discarded. As I opened the door, a magnetized notepad caught my eye, a simple shopping list in Daniel's handwriting. Such a mundane artifact of domestic life, yet now sinister in its implication of normalcy. Had he been planning grocery shopping even as he plotted to potentially murder my daughter? A muffled thump from upstairs interrupted my dark thoughts. "Kathleen?" I called. "Everything okay?" No response. Detective Parker was already moving toward the staircase, hand hovering near his weapon. "Mrs. Sullivan?" The silence stretched, my heart rate accelerating with each passing second. Then Kathleen's voice, strangely tight. "We're fine. Just knocked something over." "We're fine? Who was we?" Detective Parker caught the anomaly as well, his expression sharpening as he drew his weapon. "Stay here, Dr. Miller," he instructed, moving silently up the stairs. I had no intention of remaining behind while my daughter was potentially in danger. Grabbing a heavy marble rolling pin from the kitchen counter, I followed at a cautious distance. The upstairs hallway stood empty, bedroom doors partially open. Detective Parker moved methodically toward the master suite at the end of the corridor, weapon raised. I stayed back, clutching the rolling pin with white-knuckled determination. He paused at the threshold, then entered the master bedroom in a swift, tactical movement. I heard his voice, authoritative but controlled. "Chicago Police, put your hands where I can see them." Then another voice, one that sent ice through my veins. Daniel's voice, though lacking its usual charm, replaced instead with cold calculation. "That's not going to happen, Detective. Not unless you want this unfortunate reunion to end tragically." I edged closer, risking a glimpse through the doorway. The scene inside the bedroom struck me like a physical blow. Kathleen stood rigidly beside the bed, Daniel positioned behind her, one arm wrapped around her throat, the other holding what appeared to be a syringe near her jugular. Detective Parker maintained his aim, but the impossible geometry of the situation was obvious. He couldn't shoot without risking Kathleen's life. "You're surrounded," the detective stated calmly. "There's no way out of this house except in handcuffs or a body bag. Your choice." Daniel's laugh held no humor. "Always the same script with you people. So predictable." His gaze shifted, noticing me in the doorway. "Ah, Lucy, the meddling mother-in-law, please join our little standoff. After all, you're the reason we're here, aren't you?" "Let her go, Daniel," I said, surprising myself with my steady voice. "It's over. Drake is in custody, talking to authorities. They know about all your previous wives, the financial schemes, everything." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Drake always was weak, but he doesn't know everything. Not nearly. He pressed the syringe closer to Kathleen's neck, making her wince. "Do you know what's in this, Lucy? With your forensic psychology background, you might appreciate the elegance. Succinylcholine causes complete paralysis, including respiratory muscles. Death appears to be natural cardiac arrest, virtually undetectable in standard toxicology after a few hours." "Daniel," Kathleen began. "Shut up," he snapped. "I had such plans for us, Kathleen. You weren't supposed to be like the others, just a simple extraction of the boys' trust fund and then an amicable divorce. But your mother couldn't leave well enough alone, could she?" My mind raced, analyzing options, searching for vulnerabilities in his position or psychology. "The storage unit," I said suddenly. "Thomas Griffith's unit. They've found it, Daniel. All your documentation, your records, the evidence connecting you to each death." His expression flickered, uncertainty, then recalculation. "You're bluffing." "Drake told them everything," I continued, taking a careful step into the room despite Detective Parker's warning glance. "The warrants were executed this morning. They have your planning materials for Jennifer Walsh's accident, Eleanor Townsend's suicide. What did you call them? Exit strategies?" Daniel's grip on Kathleen tightened, his composure fracturing further. "Stop moving, Lucy. I'm not going to prison. Not for those women, not for anything." "There's no other ending now," I said, continuing my slow advance, the rolling pin partially concealed against my leg. "The only question is whether you add Kathleen's murder to the charges, guaranteeing yourself a death penalty, or whether you surrender and retain some negotiating leverage with prosecutors." His eyes darted between me, Detective Parker, and the windows, assessing escape routes that didn't exist. I could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes, the cost-benefit analysis of different violent scenarios. "Even if I let her go, I'm looking at multiple life sentences," he said finally. "Not much incentive to surrender." "You're overlooking something important," I replied, now within 10 feet of them. "You've never been caught before, never had to face consequences. Don't you want to show the world how brilliant you were? How you operated undetected for years, outwitting authorities across multiple jurisdictions?" A flicker of narcissistic pride crossed his features, the weakness I'd been probing for. All confidence men shared this Achilles heel, their overwhelming belief in their own exceptional intelligence. "Nobody else knows the full scope," he acknowledged, the syringe wavering slightly as his focus shifted to this new consideration. "Not even Drake." "Exactly," I encouraged. "Only you can reveal the true genius behind the operation. Otherwise, you're just another footnote. Your methods misunderstood or attributed to others." For a crucial moment, his ego wrestled with his survival instinct, just long enough for Kathleen to make her move. With a sharp backward thrust of her elbow into his solar plexus, she created momentary separation between them. I lunged forward, swinging the rolling pin with every ounce of strength I possessed, striking his wrist with a crack that sent the syringe flying across the room. Detective Parker moved instantly, tackling Daniel to the ground as I pulled Kathleen clear of the struggle. The second officer burst through the door, summoned by the commotion, and within moments, Daniel was subdued, handcuffed, and being recited his rights, the practiced charm entirely gone, replaced by impotent fury. "This isn't over," he spat as they hauled him to his feet. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." I met his gaze steadily. "Neither did you." As the officers led him away, Kathleen collapsed against me, delayed shock setting in. I held her tightly, my own adrenaline crash making my knees weak. "How did he get in?" she managed between shaky breaths. "They said the house was clear." "He must have already been here," I realized, hidden somewhere the officers didn't check, waiting. The thought sent another chill through me. How long had he been in the house? Had he anticipated our return, prepared specifically for this confrontation? If so, what else might he have planned that we had narrowly avoided? As police vehicles with flashing lights converged on the house and a paramedic checked Kathleen for injuries, I stepped outside for a moment of air. The evening sky had darkened to deep indigo, neighborhood lights coming on one by one. Ordinary lives continuing all around us, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. My phone buzzed, Mrs. Henderson checking on our status. I reassured her that we were safe, that Jamie was to remain with her until we arrived, and that the danger had passed. Had it, though? Daniel was in custody, but his final words echoed in my mind. This isn't over. What else didn't we know? What contingencies might a man like Daniel Colby have established for his potential capture? As I watched him being placed in a police vehicle, our eyes met briefly through the window. Despite his circumstances, a slight smile curved his lips. Not defeat, but something more disturbing. The smile of a man with one more card to play. 3 months after Daniel Colby's arrest, life had settled into a new normal. Not the same as before, but a workable rhythm nonetheless. Kathleen and Jamie had moved in with me temporarily while her house sold. She couldn't bear to live there after what had happened in the master bedroom. The proceeds would fund their fresh start in a new neighborhood, away from memories of both Richard and Daniel. The case against Daniel expanded weekly as investigators connected dots across states and jurisdictions. 6 confirmed marriages, 4 suspicious deaths, millions in stolen assets. Drake's testimony had indeed been invaluable, though his deal with prosecutors ensured he would serve minimal time compared to his former associate. On a crisp fall morning, Detective Walsh arrived at my home with a cardboard box and a grim expression. "We've finished processing the storage unit," she explained as I led her to the kitchen where coffee waited. "Most items are still in evidence, but these personal effects were cleared for return to your family." I examined the box's contents, photo albums and keepsakes from Kathleen's house, items seized during the initial investigation to determine what Daniel might have tampered with. Among them, I was surprised to find Richard's old leather-bound journal, something I hadn't even realized was missing. "We found this hidden in a false bottom of Daniel's closet organizer," Walsh explained, noticing my focus on the journal. "Forensics confirmed his fingerprints throughout. He appears to have studied it extensively." A chill ran through me as I gently opened the journal, recognizing Richard's meticulous handwriting. My late son-in-law had kept detailed records of his thoughts, business decisions, and family matters, including, I now realized with growing horror, comprehensive notes about Jamie's trust fund, family birthdays, personal histories, and private jokes. "He used this to study them," I said quietly, "to become the perfect partner for Kathleen. He knew exactly what she missed about Richard, what she valued, what would resonate with her emotionally." Walsh nodded grimly. "Classic predator methodology, but executed with exceptional thoroughness. The storage unit contained similar research materials for each of his targets. He left nothing to chance." I continued paging through the journal, stopping abruptly at an entry from shortly before Richard's death. A routine medical checkup, noting elevated blood pressure, a new prescription, and a scheduled follow-up appointment that never occurred because of his fatal heart attack 3 weeks later. A terrible suspicion bloomed. "Detective, was there any evidence in Daniel's records regarding Richard's death?" Her expression confirmed my fears before she spoke. We've reopened the investigation into your son-in-law's death. The medical examiner is reviewing tissue samples that were preserved. Preliminary findings suggest the presence of a compound that could induce cardiac symptoms indistinguishable from a natural heart attack. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. He murdered Richard to create his opportunity with Kathleen? We believe so. Daniel's records included surveillance notes on your daughter and her family dating back nearly 6 months before Richard's death. Walsh hesitated. There's more. Daniel wasn't working alone on this operation. Drake, beyond Drake, she corrected. Someone much closer to the situation. Someone who helped identify targets and provided inside information that would have been otherwise inaccessible. A knock at the front door interrupted us. Walsh tensed slightly, hand moving instinctively toward her concealed weapon. Expecting anyone? Just the estate attorney, I assured her, checking my watch. Kathleen's meeting him here to finalize some paperwork related to Richard's remaining assets. Walsh relaxed, gathering her notes. I should go. We'll need to speak with Kathleen about these developments, but I'd prefer to do so officially, with proper support in place. I nodded understanding, seeing her to the door where Charles Whitman, Richard's longtime attorney and family friend, waited on the porch. At 65, Charles looked much as he always had. Distinguished gray hair, conservative suit, leather portfolio tucked under one arm. He'd handled Richard's estate with compassion and efficiency after his death, and now was helping Kathleen navigate the legal complexities of her brief, fraudulent marriage to Daniel. Lucy, wonderful to see you, Charles greeted warmly, stepping inside as Walsh departed with a professional nod. Is Kathleen here? I've brought the final trust document amendments for her signature. She's picking Jamie up from school, I explained, leading him to the living room. She should be back any minute. Can I offer you some coffee while you wait? That would be lovely, thank you. In the kitchen, I busied myself with cups and saucers, my mind still reeling from Walsh's revelations. Richard's death potentially murdered, Daniel having a closer accomplice than we'd realized, the methodical planning evident in his research materials. I carried the coffee tray back to the living room, finding Charles examining the contents of the evidence box, Richard's journal open in his hands. Ah, Richard's journal, he commented, his tone casual. I'd wondered where this had gone. So many useful details. Something in his phrasing stopped me cold in the doorway. Useful details. Charles looked up, catching my expression, and something shifted in his eyes, the warmth vanishing, replaced by cool calculation I'd never noticed before. You really should have left well enough alone, Lucy, he said quietly. Daniel had a good plan. Clean, efficient, minimal collateral damage. Jamie's trust would have been accessed legally through proper channels, with legitimate-appearing psychological treatment. No one would have been hurt. The coffee tray slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, cups shattering on the hardwood floor. It was you, I whispered, the final piece clicking into terrible place. You helped him target Kathleen after Richard died. You knew about Jamie's trust because you helped establish it. Charles sighed, setting the journal aside with meticulous care. Daniel and I have worked together for years. I identify potential targets through my legal practice, people with significant assets, minimal family connections, exploitable vulnerabilities. He executes the acquisition phase. We share the proceeds, a perfectly complementary partnership. My mind raced through implications. The other wives, some were my clients directly. Others came through professional referrals. The legal profession provides remarkable access to people's financial and personal circumstances. He smiled thinly. Though I must say, Daniel got sloppy with Kathleen, too emotionally invested. I warned him that targeting a younger woman with a child involved unnecessary complications. And Richard? I managed, my voice barely audible. Did you help murder him too? Charles waved dismissively. A business decision. Richard's company was facing a potential hostile takeover. The stress alone might have triggered his heart condition eventually. We simply accelerated the timeline. As he spoke, I became aware of my phone in my pocket, the voice memo application still running from when I'd been dictating notes earlier and never stopped the recording. Carefully, I kept my expression neutral, buying time. How many others? I asked, taking a step sideways toward the hallway. Besides Daniel's wives? Over the years? Charles considered this with disturbing casualness. 14 successful operations. Daniel handled the marriages and relationship aspects. I managed the legal framework, ensuring clean access to assets through properly executed documents. His eyes narrowed slightly. Where is Kathleen exactly? Traffic, probably, I replied, taking another subtle step toward the hallway where my purse, containing my handgun, sat on a side table. Why did you tell me all this, Charles? You must realize I'll go to the police immediately. His smile chilled me. And tell them what? That the respected attorney who served this community for 40 years confessed to being a criminal mastermind? Without evidence, you'll sound as paranoid as Daniel claimed. He glanced at his watch. In any case, this conversation is purely academic. I'm not leaving loose ends this time. He reached into his portfolio, withdrawing not documents, but a syringe similar to the one Daniel had threatened Kathleen with. Succinylcholine. I recognized aloud. Daniel's preferred method. Efficient and virtually undetectable, Charles confirmed, rising from his seat. A tragic case of cardiac arrest in an older woman with a family history of heart problems. Stress from recent traumatic events likely contributed. He'd done his research on me as well. Of course he had. As he stepped toward me, the front door opened behind me, and Kathleen's voice called out, "Mom, why is there a police car out front? Did something happen?" Charles hesitated, the syringe half concealed against his leg. I seized the momentary distraction to lunge toward the hallway, grabbing my purse and withdrawing my handgun in one fluid motion that belied my 65 years. "Stay back, Kathleen," I shouted, aiming directly at Charles. "Call 911. Charles is working with Daniel." I heard Kathleen gasp, followed by Jamie's frightened voice and the sound of them retreating onto the porch. Charles and I stood frozen in tableau, his expression morphing from confident control to cold fury. "You won't shoot me, Lucy," he said, taking a measured step forward. "Not in your own living room, not someone you've known for 20 years. I centered the sights on his chest, my hands perfectly steady. "I will if you take one more step. I've already lost one son-in-law to you people. Never again." The wail of approaching sirens penetrated the tense silence. Relief flooded through me as I realized the police car Kathleen had spotted wasn't a coincidence. Detective Walsh must have remained nearby, perhaps intending to return after I'd had time to process her revelations about Richard. Charles heard it too, calculation replacing confidence in his expression. With sudden decision, he lunged toward the back of the house. I fired once, the bullet striking his shoulder and spinning him against the wall. He slumped to the floor, the syringe skittering across hardwood, his expression a mixture of pain and disbelief. "You shot me," he gasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "You actually shot me." "I told you I would," I replied, keeping the gun trained on him as heavy footsteps pounded up the porch steps behind me. "You should have believed me." As officers flooded into the house, securing Charles and calling for medical assistance, I finally lowered my weapon, hands shaking with delayed reaction. Detective Walsh appeared at my side, gently taking the gun. "We heard everything on the radio," she said quietly. "Your phone call came through just as I was pulling away. You kept the line open the entire time." I hadn't made any call, then remembered the voice memo still recording in my pocket. Somehow, I must have triggered the emergency call function while documenting his confession. Kathleen rushed to me, Jamie held protectively behind her. "Mom, are you okay? What happened?" I embraced them both, the full impact of what we'd narrowly escaped washing over me. "It's over," I assured them, watching as officers led a handcuffed, wounded Charles from the house. Really over this time. In the months that followed, Charles Whitman's arrest blew the conspiracy wide open. His detailed records, seized from his office safe, provided evidence that connected all 14 operations across multiple states. Additional accomplices were identified and arrested. Restitution processes began for victims' families. Richard's death was officially reclassified as homicide. A year after that fateful wedding reception, we stood together, Kathleen, Jamie, and I, in the garden of Kathleen's new home across town. A simple memorial stone for Richard rested beneath a flowering cherry tree, finally giving us the closure that had been denied when we believed his death was natural. "I still can't believe Charles chose our family," Kathleen said quietly as Jamie arranged small stones around the memorial. "After knowing us for so long, that's what made us perfect targets," I replied. "Familiarity created trust, and trust created vulnerability." Jamie looked up from his careful arrangement of stones. "Grandma Lucy, is it okay that I sometimes still feel scared when I meet new people?" I knelt beside him, choosing my words carefully. "It's okay to trust your feelings, Jamie. That's what saved us, remember? Your warning about what you saw under that table. He nodded thoughtfully. Like a superpower. Exactly like that, I agreed. The superpower of paying attention. As we walked back toward the house together, I reflected on how our ordeal had changed us. Kathleen was more cautious now, but not bitter. She'd returned to teaching, finding purpose in her work with children. Jamie still had occasional nightmares, but spoke openly about his feelings rather than burying them. And I had discovered reserves of courage and determination I'd never known I possessed. We would always carry the scars of those terrible days, the betrayal, the danger, the loss of Richard. But we had survived, not just individually, but as a family. Stronger in the broken places, as the saying goes. All because a 6-year-old boy had trusted his instincts and whispered a warning to his grandmother. "Grandma Lucy!" Jamie called from ahead, where he'd raced up the porch steps. "Can we have cookies for lunch? I promised to eat vegetables for dinner." I laughed, the sound free and genuine. "Cookies for lunch? That's outrageous negotiation, sir." "Is that a yes?" he asked hopefully. "It's a maybe," I replied, climbing the steps to join him. "And in this family, that's practically a yes. Some battles, after all, aren't worth fighting, especially when you've already won the war."